The following 6 stories are about people who encountered a time slip, a phenomenon that causes unexpected time travel. The MARGOLIS family. In 1978, the MARGOLIS family were walking through the town of Horning in Norfolk, in northeast England, when suddenly everything fell silent. Then they all felt dizzy and disorientated, and the landscape appeared to just melt away, and the modern building that had just recently walked past has suddenly turned into ancient cottages, and the modern road in front of them turned into a muddy track. 1 minute they were looking at cars driving along the road, then they were confronted with horses and carts. Then a thin man wearing old-fashioned brown clothing was coming towards them, but walked straight past as if they were invisible. But as quickly as the ancient town suddenly appeared from out of nowhere, the modern world returned with cars and traffic and modern buildings. Andy LEASK. In 1977, a man called Andy LEASK was 5 years old and his older sister was 7, and they were staying with their great aunt in an old Norfolk house that dated back to the 1600s. Their story began when they woke up very early and went to the living room, where they saw a fire burning and an old woman in a long dress and cap using a spinning wheel. She looked up but didn't say anything. Thinking she would make their breakfast, the children walked into the kitchen, but it was dark. When they went back to the living room to ask the old woman a question, they found she had completely vanished. The fireplace was cold and there was no longer a fire burning. Later that morning, when some adults appeared, they asked about the old woman, but they said that it was impossible as home help had not arrived that day. To this day, Andy was still baffled by the incident and where the past and present had somehow collided. Andrew LEASK now believed he and his sister were caught up in a time slip. The Roman cavalry. Colin Ayling and Colin England were experienced metal detector users, and at the time of the strange incident had been detecting in an area called Boulder Field in Shrewsbury, Western England. It was called Boulder Fields because of the large number of boulders that were piled up on one particular location. One day they got lucky when they found a Republican silver denarius, which was the standard Roman silver coin that dated back to the time of Julius Caesar, along with several other Roman bronzes and other denarius coins from the time of Rutilius Flaccus, circa 70 BC. They also found other Roman artefacts and the tip of a Roman javelin when the name Nigel had been stamped. The original Roman name was Nigellus, but it had obviously been shortened to fit the javelin. As the men were busy studying the amazing finds, they suddenly heard the sound of horses' hooves galloping, and they appeared to be heading in their direction. They quickly took cover behind some boulders and could hear the sound as they thundered past where they had just been standing. When they quickly looked up, expecting to see the horses galloping in the distance, there was nothing to be seen. The men felt totally disoriented by what had just happened and decided to head back to their car. They'd not travelled too far when they came upon a tightly packed hedge that appeared impenetrable, which was not there when they started the journey. After much effort in overcoming the obstacle, they managed to reach the car and took their findings to archaeologist Mike Stokes. It appears that the men had encountered a time slip, as the galloping horses could have been a detachment of Roman soldiers, and the sudden appearance of the hedge may have been part of a cavalry's detachment fortifications from 2,000 years ago. Anne May. Mrs. Anne May was a school teacher from Norwich in northwest England, and at the time the incident was in Inverness in the Scottish Highlands with her husband. They were studying the Bronze Age claver cans on the eastern side of the River Nairn. When they'd finished studying the cans, Anne May decided to take a rest against one of the stones, and suddenly a strange feeling came over her, and when she looked up, she saw a group of men that appeared to be dressed from the past. They had long dark hair and wore rough tunics with cross-gartered trousers that crossed at the ankle to the knee. Mrs. May could only look on in amazement as they dragged one of the big standing stones into an allocated place in the circle. But when a group of tourists suddenly walked into the site, the group of men suddenly vanished and she was returned to the present. Joan Forman. Author Joan Forman was visiting Haddon Hall, Derbyshire in the East Midlands of England and came upon a stone courtyard where 4 children were playing. The oldest of the children was a girl who looked to be about 10 years old, with shoulder-length fair hair. She was wearing a grey-green silk dress with a lace collar and a Dutch-style hat. When Joan first arrived at the scene, the girl had her back to her, but then she suddenly turned around to face her, and she could see a distinctive face. The girl had a wide jaw with a small upturned nose. As Joan moved closer to the girls, they suddenly vanished. It appears that the act of moving towards the girls had cut some sort of current between them, which had allowed Joan to be able to see them in her time. Joan then walked into the hall to look at the various paintings on the walls to see if she could identify the girl in any of the paintings. As she walked along, she finally came upon a portrait of a young girl titled Lady Grace Manners, wearing the same dress with lace collar and the distinctive Dutch hat. When Joan made inquiries, she found that Lady Grace Manners had been associated with Haddon Hall many centuries ago. Lady Grace Manners' father was the Duke of Rutland. Had Joan Forman come upon a sudden time slip? Edna Thomas. Sometime in the late 1950s, Edna Thomas of Shoeburyness in southeast Essex in southeast England was walking in the nearby countryside close to home. As she was returning from a walk, she distinctly sensed the breathing of a horse close by and could hear the sound of horses' hooves on the gravel. The horse was panting heavily, as if it was carrying a heavy load, but as she looked around to find where they were, she found there was absolutely nothing there, and was totally baffled as it was a wide open space, so there was nowhere they could have gone. Edna decided to make some inquiries and learned that the area she had been walking had once been a brick field, and horses were used to pull the brick-laden carts along railway tracks. The area she had been walking was the same location where she felt the horse's presence. Had Edna experienced a time slip or a residual haunting? Or stone tape theory, where environmental elements are capable of storing traces of human thoughts, emotions, and in the case of Edna Thomas, the regular actions of a working horse. Louise Hand. In 1920, Louise Hand was 9 years old and was playing in front of her grandmother's cottage in Bury, Lancashire, northwest England. Louise then ran inside her grandmother's cottage to get some refreshment and found that the furniture had changed and the cottage was older looking. The door to the kitchen was no longer there, and the insides were extremely quiet and dark. Louise immediately thought she'd run into the wrong cottage. She then quickly ran out to check if she was in the right place, and found that she was, and then ran back inside, only to be confronted with the same surroundings. Totally confused, she ran outside and continued to play with the other children. It was not until she spent some considerable time playing outside with the other children that she dared to re-enter her grandmother's cottage. She approached the cottage with trepidation, and upon entering, found that things were back to normal. Louise Hand never forgot the strange incident, and over the years, she came to the conclusion that she had somehow experienced some sort of time slip.